So time for a new build, and I'm going to be doing the Tamiya Do 335. This is the single seat version. To start with, I'm going to be looking at doing the seat belts. So I've got a little bit of foil there, sticky black foil. This can work on any foil. I'm going to put some white glue on the foil after I had sanded it down. So just see there, I'm just sanding it down. So I'm just making the surface a little bit more roughed up, so the decal will stick to it. And then I'm going to get some white glue and put some white glue on there and some setting solution to make sure it all sticks nicely. Once this is all dried and all sealed with the white glue, I can then put it into the seat and I will have a more realistic looking seat belt than if I just put the decal in there. So it's going to give it a more of a 3D as opposed to a 2D quality. As you can see there, just going to wait for it to dry. So while that's drying, I can move on to working on some of the parts for the seat and the cockpit. So I start off with cutting these parts out using a bigger set of sprue cutters. So these are the Citadel ones. Before then, I move on to cutting the nubs off with a set of Master Tools ones. These are the single blade ones. Before using the main sanders in the different grits to then smooth everything out so I can get good alignment on all the parts. Any bigger nubs that are left on, I can cut off with a knife, but in this instance I don't think I need to do that. I can get rid of with sanding and snips. So once all the parts are together, I can start adding paint. The parts have all been primed with Mr. Surfacer Aqueous, and I'm going to be using H75, which is dark sea grey, which is a close approximation to the actual cockpit colour of these German aircraft. I'm not doing anything fancy here because the actual cockpit is quite enclosed. And once the canopy's on, because I'll be doing it closed canopy, you can hardly see anything in there. So I'm doing a little bit of shadowing in certain areas, and then I'll go back and I will put a heavier coat on to help blend all those parts in, not forgetting the fuselage sides. All right. So now I'm going to add some colour to the seat, which I believe was one of the first injection seats going. And this is H56, which is intermediate blue. And this is just the type of blue that was closest to what I had for the seat. Again, it's going to be hidden mainly by the actual cockpit parts. And then using a pencil, I can add some metallic highlights to certain parts of this seat to make it more worn. I'm not going for overly worn on this aircraft. I want it to look used but not abused, because obviously these aircraft were later in the war and they wouldn't have got a lot of use. I can also use the pencil to add highlights to switches and scratches and all that sort of stuff. We're moving on to the seat belts now, and now I can cut them out carefully. It's best to try and use some scissors for this, because if you use a knife, there's a chance you might cut. When you cut, you might pull the actual decal off. So I'm being really careful to try and get as close as I can. And hopefully once washers and all that sort of on this cockpit, we will have what looks like a 3D seatbelt system. Now it's all cut out, I can take that backing paper off and start sticking it to the actual seat. Now you can do this with normal foil. At this point you'd use some super glue or some white glue, and hopefully you can see just there it's looking a little bit more 3D. I do add a little bit of glue to certain points on this just to help things settle into place, and I'm just using an old needle, okay, with some super glue that I'm going to attach to the parts, and then just hopefully once you look in the cockpit it will look like some seat belts. Fingers crossed anyway. Well, that's the plan. And after a bit of wash, you can see the cockpit there, all completed. Just bear in mind that I did something wrong with this. Behind the instrument panel should have been black because you can see it through the window. I didn't know this at the time, so I've not painted it. Okay, so something to be aware of when you start building your aircraft. Next up, we start building it. Now this is a Tamiya kit, so obviously it's going to go together really well. As you can see, we're just putting bits and pieces in there, and I'll just carry on building it, and then I'll sand any parts from it, which we'll talk about when we get to it. So for sanding all the seam lines, I'm going to use these Meng or Display sanders. Okay, they're exactly the same. Okay, and they've got different grits starting from 180. They go to 280, 400, 600, and 800. And then the other box has 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 grit. And all I do is every part I just work my way through each individual grit until I'm happy with the seam. Now I can check the seam with either paint or a Sharpie. If you use a Sharpie, make sure you get rid of it with some IPA, or you make sure you sand it all so it all comes off. Okay. Once everything's sanded, I need to start looking at putting seam lines back in, and not seam lines, panel lines back in. And to use that, I've got different types of scribers. I have got a little razor saw there, got some Tamiya tape and some dyno tape. Okay, so the dyno tape's quite thick, so you can put your tool against it and give you a straight line. Now I always cut it in half, so two bits will do better, and I always use a little bit of Tamiya tape. So I put the Tamiya tape down where I want it, then I put the dyno tape on top of that. The reason I do that is so I can then maneuver the dyno tape a lot easier, because the stickiness goes quite quickly on the dyno tape. So with the Tamiya tape, instead of going one or two uses out the tape, I can now get maybe 4 or 5 different uses, so I can place it in different places. So you can see I'm just running the tool down the tape. I'm doing it ever so lightly, okay, just once or twice. I can take it off, and then I can move the tape, and then I carry on going round until I've done where I need to do it. Once that's done, I will then look at using a razor saw for over the curved bits, because a razor saw just goes over a little bit easier. So you see me there, I picked up the razor saw and I'm just running it over the curved bit. I'll do this for the bottom and top of the fuselage, I'll do it on the wings, I'll do it in all the places I need. I can then run some Tamiya extra thin, and any burrs or whatever, it will get melted, and I'm left with a nice panel line. Now once that's done, I'm going to start looking at doing the markings. So I'm going to using this mask set. As you can see, I've already used primer, and I am going to put my markings down on the actual kit. I've put a bit of tape there just to help me guide where I want it to go, and I'm going to use another bit of Tamiya tape to pull off where I need to pull off. And then I'm going to line up the bottom of the cross with the where I want it, and like so. Come on, you'll get there. There we are. Then I can pull the tape off, and then I can very gently remove the masking. So you can see me pulling it off there. Okay, and you can see that some of it's left down, or what I need it to be is left down on the actual model. Now the reason I use a Tamiya tape to actually pick it up and put it on, if I just try to pull that one square up, potentially I will get a misshapen cross because it'll pull it and tear it. So at least we're doing that way, I can then keep it all, you know, the same. I'm now painting it in a black. It can be any black. Okay, I'm just dusting it over because I want to get rid of that white. I could go back with a primer, but because primer is quite thick, I thought I'd just do it with normal paint. So this is just putting all the black on it, so it's making the base coat all the same. Okay, and I need to do it on the bottom there anyway, because some of the parts of these crosses are black. Okay, which you'll see when I come to unmask it. And I'm just taking my time doing like misting coats, so I don't want to absolutely flood the area. Once all that's put back, and then I'm going to start looking at using a bottom coat. So for the belly, I'm using H17, okay, which to start with I am just mottling on. Now I'm just mottling on in panel lines and stuff like that to give me a random sort of pattern. Once this random pattern's done, I will then fill in where it's not been, and I will start, you know, blocking it out, and hopefully you'll get like a marbling texture underneath. Well, hopefully anyway. So we'll see how we get on. I'll be back in a bit. So I'll apologise at this point because I've just looked and I haven't got the footage of the bottom, but the same principle applies to the top. For this one I'm using Aqueous 422 and I think 421 for the darker colour. So I'm going to start off by just, like I was done the bottom, just mottling it in certain places, as you can see there, for the markings, over the markings and what have you, just to start building my colour up. It's not a quick process, but it helps break up the aircraft, so it's just not all one tonality over the whole of the aircraft, so you get more interest what you actually look at. And this is a fairly simple marking, okay, because it's all straight lines, a splinter camo. So with this mottling, to break it up, it actually makes it look more interesting. Anyway, I'll waffle on enough. I'll come back to you when we've got something else to talk about. Yellow into the paint, just a couple of drops just to lighten it, and I'm going to start adding a little bit highlights in the panel areas, which you can see. Okay, again, this is just to break everything up. Once I've done this, I'll do a darker tone, and then I might do some panel lining, and then I might do some other bits and pieces before I then come back and put the base colour over everything to give me that again, the different tones to break up the camouflage, to make it more interesting to look at, like hopefully what it would be on the real aircraft. So what's he doing? Yeah, so you can see I'm just working on the areas, trotting about, waiting for it to come back dry, go to other parts. Really random squiggly lines, and that's all it is. Once I've done that, I then can add a darker colour, like I said, and now I'm going to start adding some bits and pieces to there now to add darker tones in there. Okay, so you can see I'm doing like panel lines if my airbrush starts working, which it's not, it's playing silly buggers. There we are. So I'm now adding like darker tones to panel lines and stuff like that. Okay, again, just to give it a little bit more interest. Once that's done, I will then come back with the top coat, and you can see I've added a brown there as well into that, and now I'm going to cover all that with a really thin top coat to blend it all together, to make it, you know, to bring it all together, to bring it all as one. And hopefully once I've finished faffing about, you can see the different tones on the wings, the fuselage and all that. And then I do the exactly the same as what I've just done with the darker colour once I'm masked up. Now on there, I've unmasked, but I forgot to unmask the upper wing crosses, which in a few photos time you'll be able to see. Okay, so I'm really happy how it turned out. There you are, you can see all the masking off. Really nicely done. I'm really chuffed on how it's turned out, the whole paint job, from the masking to the colours and all that sort of stuff. Next up, we start looking at a little bit of weathering. I have put a gloss coat on it at this time and any of the small little decals, and now I am just adding some Starship filth for the panel lines, just to help those panel lines pop out and look the part. This is just an oil paint that I thinned with some odorless thinner. Okay, so the odorless thinner I pick up, you can pick up from anywhere, mainly from hobby and craft shops, and it's exactly the same as the thinner that you will get from the top. There we are. That's been topped up with some odorless thinner, and now I'm just removing that thinner. First off, with a cotton bud, I put it onto a bit of kitchen paper, and then I can start wiping it off. So I've got rid of most of it, and now I'm starting to wipe it in the direction of the airflow. Get a clean bit of kitchen paper and then keep on wiping it and rubbing it. You can leave this as heavy or as low as you want, so you can use it as a filter, or you can use it just as a panel line wash, which is what I want it for. So there you are, you can see the wings there all getting removed. Once that's done, I will then move on to the top side, and I will done the top side. Now I'm going to use some different colours. I've matted the aircraft, and I'm going to use again some odorless thinners. I'm going to wet the wing, and I'm going to use the dot technique to actually add some more interest. So just little bits of oil all over, and then I'm going to blend them in with the direction of the airflow with a brush dampened with a little bit of filler. It's only really dampened with thinner. Once this is done, that's more or less the aircraft finished. I do other bits and pieces of weathering, but unfortunately I didn't record, or I can't find the actual footage, and hopefully once we've done this you will see the aircraft all together, and that's the build complete. Like I said, I'm really happy how this aircraft turned out. Okay, you can see there I've added some exhaust staining. I didn't want to do a lot of weathering, reason being, like I said, this aircraft, it wants to be used a lot, because there weren't that many and they didn't see a lot of combat. So I've just added a few chips and dust marks and what have you, especially over the wing root there, because the pilot would enter the plane from the rear. There would be a ladder at the rear of that wing, and they'd walk forward to get into the cockpit. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed that build, and I'll see you on the next one. Thank you and goodbye.